I have to do this? But do I have to turn around and read the motion again? Because this all support.
They're here.
The harms and the benefits. I don't know why all the other teams are so engaged in discussing whether or not it's possible, whether or not they have the capacity, whether or not they have enough weapons. That's not the debate. Even if they manage to prove it, which I don't think either side of the house is opening was able to, they should move on to the next part, right? What are the harms? What are the things that happen? Thank you, CG, for finally giving us something to work with. But even then, unfortunately, to turn their back on you, karma has finally hit you. Consolidation ended up becoming a jargon, right? Because that's the burden they're supposed to prove. Just war, previously, like war motions is easy because it's so easy to justify the war. You know what the violence looks like. You know why it's so unjust. You know why Al-Qaeda and ISIS are so hated. But part of that then, the thing that they're trying to defend as a democracy, the people that they choose to be the leaders who's going to lead this new countries to the Sahel region towards a proper democracy, is Trump? I am so confused. But several responses first, right? They said, it's okay, CG said, it's okay if US gets hated, right? That doesn't really matter. What we want to talk is about how US, ever the great democracy they are going to lead these countries into consolidation and not hating each race. Read that again with Trump in mind, right? There's no impact to the war, sure, but the impact is to the values that you are supposed to weigh, what you're supposed to sell, what happens after, what kind of democracy is built, what exactly is this new technology that both government teams speak of, in what capacity? Are you going to use AI-powered bombing planners that you can create, so you can create new war crimes for you to face in ICC that white supremacists can only dream of? At the end of the day, that's the first response. OG talks about like everything beautiful, like NATO, blah, 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 blah. One, I think they read the wrong motion, solve hard to them. But second, benefits can put aside, right? Everybody agrees. If Sahel region is so very vulnerable, then the question then that they have to answer is very simple. What do they stand to achieve from this war? What do they stand to achieve from this invasion, right? Because they're so vulnerable, in the long term, what's going to happen? Even if they do succeed, the democracy is just going to be so bad to the point that they have to go back again, and they have to build it from the road up again. But another vulnerable actor that we have to discuss in this debate are the citizens in the West, right?
Yeah.
Because how do you justify the taxpayers' money being used for foreign affairs when internally you are a mess? Internally you have to deal with like the shutdown between the Democrats and the Republicans. Internally you have to deal with the impending AI bubble that is about to burst. You're about to lose so much money in a market that doesn't actually exist. And all these other things. And like half the White House is implicated in the Epstein files, maybe not. But anyway, so there's so much shit that you have to deal with, right? So I don't think like any benefits have been championed so far. So let's move on to our argument. Our argument is simple. Nobody is willing to die for a democracy in 2025. At its very core, an invasion is building a democracy without the consent of the people involved, right? Why is it likely to fail? We're going to assess this through 3 principles of democracy, but even then, I can't believe it has come down to this. But first, people participation. Let's talk about what happens after the war, right? Regardless of whether or not they succeed, you still have to build a government, you still have to build something for the people to work with. Are the people likely to receive this government in a good manner, right? 3 things. You have fragmented civil war factions that you will have to justify and mediate between the 2 of them. How are you likely to reach a common ground between the 2 of them after the invasion, after they have lost so much people and so much blood? Second, you ask back partner. Another part to this is that probably the West is going to insert some leaders, going to back some factions. That's going to create even more internal divisions. One is going to unilaterally win the election every single time. And, you know, foreign affairs and everything are going to discuss it in the journals and like, oh, I wonder why this party keeps winning. Nobody knows, right? But third one is that there's going to be proxies from competing superpowers as well, because you also have to deal with China, you also have to deal with Russia and all these other things. So people participation, what happens then? Who's going to supervise it? I don't think little Miss Hypocrite US is going to. Second, accountability. That there is a party that is willing to take responsibility. Is the West the right actor to do this in 2025, in this decade, right? In Trump, you have government shutdown, everything I mentioned earlier. In EU, half of the UK wants to backtrack on a policy that they voted in themselves. EU, please take us back. And another elephant in the room that has not been addressed is Israel, right? How are you going to justify another violent opposition that you are, like I tell you, people don't want to join the US military anymore. How do you have the world's full of pew-pews and you don't want to join because you see all the blood that's happening? It's so embarrassing right now. But third part is transparency, right? How are any governments, regardless of who wins, willing to be truthful about all the blood that they shed? No, because it is very rarely justified, especially in this debate where it's never been clear why is it so bad, what's so bad about ISIS and Al-Qaeda, other than the fact that maybe there must have been a different color. But sure, let's go with Justin.
So, the argument of establishing democracy works against opening government. In our side of the house, the comparison is clear. we established that the comparison in your side is the fact that the current military junta leading the country into the future will probably subject these people to much more harm. In fact, they will die longer and more suffering death compared to what happens in our side.
Sarah, you heard that, right? Your next burden is to prove how that government will look like. That's such a hard way to do without making it new matter. But further, why is this the most important? Again, this is like, let's read the motion. I know that debates right now like, no, I gave you a chance earlier. No, this afterwards, yeah, anything. But next I'm going to talk about like what the alternative is then. What are we going to do if we don't invite the leading by the West? Sit down. We're going to let them be. If it's that bad, I think what the West and the rest of the world should do is just let them duke it out. Whatever the outcome, no matter who wins between Al-Qaeda, ISIS, or other opposition, it's fine. Why? Because the government needs to be built organically. Because at the end of the day, it is something that they will definitely consent to. What else do you win? How do you win with a democracy extension in an IR debate? It's simple. Because at the core of everything, war motions have not popped up in a long time. Because it is so easy to concede that the war is necessary. It is so easy to see that there is someone that you need to fight for. But that's not the case from this motion, right? You need to justify why these people who are trying to resolve an internal conflict in the country has to suffer through dying by the hands of an American who barely graduated high school, right?